Good morning, all.
Good morning.
And thanks for coming to our February Veterans Meeting. As you know, we meet every first, I hope you know, we meet every first Monday of the month at 9:30 in this room. And I usually try to get one of our Mason Pointe veterans to talk about their experiences in the military and a little bit about their background. So today is another one of those, and I really appreciate when the veterans agree to do this. Today is Jim Boden, and he'll be talking about, he's an Army veteran, a Vietnam veteran, and a resident here. So today he'll be telling his story about his experiences in the military and a little bit about his background. So please listen, and please come again in February. We do this, as I said, every first Monday of the month at 9:30 in this room. And I don't know yet, I haven't firmed up a speaker for March, but we will have one, and it will be announced. So thank you for coming. I hope you like this, and please let others know. Now remember, this meeting is not just for veterans. It's for veterans to tell their story. And I think in most cases in all cases, I've had very positive feedback from the people that come, because they really like to hear the veteran's story. So those of you that are veterans out there and haven't stepped forward yet, please consider doing it, because only you know your story, and it's different in all cases, and we in the audience are glad to hear it. So anyway, Jim Boden will be talking. Jim?
Okay. Hank asked me to talk about the background a little bit. Went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio in 1963, and got a student deferment 3 months after I registered for the draft. We kept getting one, 1963, 64, 65. We got married. I found this redheaded girl from Toledo, Ohio, that courted for a couple of years. And somebody said two could live as cheap as one, and I don't think that's really true. But anyway, we did get married, and so we graduated in 1967, and I thought I'd go for a master's degree, and Jean started teaching in Trenton, Ohio after graduation. And somehow she got pregnant. I don't know exactly what happened. But apparently we didn't realize it right away, but in April of 1968 we realized it, and we also got a thing in the mail that said, "You are drafted." So I appealed to my draft board in Akron, Ohio, and was denied. And furthermore, they said, after the child is born, you have to report for induction 5 days after that. I guess they didn't want to pay for the childbirth in the hospital, so they delayed it until after that, so we had to pay for it. With that, Jean had the baby October 31. We had a couple of my high school buddies packed up our apartment and got in the truck and drove up to Toledo, Ohio, where her mom and dad lived. We soon realized that my pay would go from $625 a month to $125 a month, about an 80% reduction, and that was not going to allow her to live independently. So we got up there and dropped her and a 5-day-old baby off, and her dad drove me down to Cleveland, Ohio, where I was inducted into the U.S. Army. So we took a flight from Cleveland to Fort Dix, New Jersey. Do you want my chair? For basic training. The flight was really interesting because I had an 18-year-old who was beside me and he was crying the whole way there. He'd never left his mother and father. He'd never been out of Ohio. And I was trying to console him, but at the same time I'm trying to buck up myself, frankly. So we get there, and if you've ever had a haircut that's lasted longer than a minute, I mean, it was a minute. It couldn't have been more than a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Next guy. Got your uniform, your boots. I'd always heard these, or seen these cartoons of World War II with the guys peeling potatoes, and kind of thought that was funny, called KP. I wondered, what's KP? I don't even know what it stands for, but anyway, they were peeling potatoes. Well, I found out it was kitchen patrol, and I was feeding potatoes into this machine that spun them around and took off the covering. You had the skins and the water coming off one side and these potatoes coming off the other, and I got to peel off any rotten spots. I'm in an engineering position, industrial engineering position, and a week later I'm peeling potatoes. So anyway, we had basic training. Honestly, it was quite an adjustment for all of us. I learned how to make a bed. I learned how to shine boots. I learned how to work in a team, because if you didn't work as a team and somebody was having a problem, everybody suffered, so you learned right away you cover for everybody. This was a proud moment. I never had shot a rifle before, and out of 120 people, I was the best shot. Thank you. The crazy thing was, why did I do that? I didn't want to be a sniper in the infantry, but luckily the Army doesn't pay any attention to whatever you've done, so it didn't apply in my case. So in the group that I was in, we had 70% draftees, and the majority of them, 70%, were about 18 years old. And then there was a whole group of college graduates, and there were 5 of us that were 23 and above. 4 of them divorced, 1 married. I was the one married. So it was kind of a unique situation. But we did learn the military way. I learned how to march, learned how to shine my boots, and basic military courtesy and orders, taking orders. There it is. After that, 90% of the people in that group went to advanced infantry training or to the artillery schools. 10% had connections and went to DC or Germany or someplace like that. This is a rowdy crowd of guys. I'm sorry, I took photos of a photo in an album that I couldn't peel out. And Chuck helped try to dress some of them up, but some of them there wasn't much hope. But anyway, this was serious stuff. How to find booby traps, how to use a grenade launcher, how to use an M16, things to watch out for. The people that were the teachers there were very intense. They were Vietnam veterans, they'd been there, they knew what to do, and they wanted to make sure that we were prepared mentally and physically. So by the time 12 weeks rolled around, we learned quite a bit. For some crazy reason, 90% of those people went to Vietnam. I went to armored personnel carrier training. Why, I have no idea. This was a 3-week course on how to drive this tracked vehicle that has 2 sticks and an accelerator. That's it. There's no brake, there's no turn signals, there's no flashing lights, it's just 2 sticks. It really didn't take 3 weeks to learn, but you know how that goes. So after that, I thought, okay, I'm either a sniper or driving an APC. And so I got my orders, time off with Gene and my son, who I had seen for 3 weeks out of 6 months. And went to Fort Lewis in Washington State, and then from there to Narita and to Cam Ranh Bay in South Vietnam. This was a strange situation. We get to Cam Ranh Bay, it's sandy, it's hot, it's humid, it's right on the coast. and the next day took a flight into the central highlands of South Vietnam. This is in the middle of the country, in the middle this way, in the middle this way. And it's about 2,500, 3,000 feet, drier, red clay, totally different than the coast. So we line up, there's about 150 of us there from several different flights that came in, and they're reading off, okay, here's the names, read off. 20 guys leave, 30 guys leave, 50 guys leave. There's two of us, Boden up here at the front and a guy named Poole all the way at the back. We're the last two guys out of 150 people. I thought, oh my God, what's going to happen to us? Some E6, which would be a staff sergeant, says, get your gear, get in that pickup truck over there, we're going to Pointe. And we have to get there before dark. You cannot be on the road after dark. So we hurry up and get in the back of the truck. He wouldn't let us ride in the cab. We had to sit on these hard benches in the back and going all the way down the highway where they had blown up part of the roads. There was a pipeline along the road, and you could see pools of black in different spots where the VC had blown up the pipeline of diesel that was going from one place to another. And that was, this actually was taken in Vietnam with guards on a bridge. They missed this bridge because it was blown up by the Viet Cong. That was more typical than not. This was our base camp in Pointe where we pulled in that night. Hello. This was beat, typical for the outside. Bunkers. Guard. We had mountains around us. These are the barracks for the people that were there full time. I stayed in that one night, had a bed. This is the inside, pretty Spartan. Mosquito nets. The base hired a lot of women for cleaning, laundry, and chores like that. And the men, usually either very young teenage boys or older people that did some of the maintenance on the outside, like cutting the weeds and grass.
Oh my gosh.
We were a 12-man crew in teams of 2, and I'll explain what we did here in just a second, but this is one of the crew. This was what I did. It had nothing to do with an APC or nothing to do with a sniper. It's called a portable personnel radar detector. And what it did, you set this thing up, and it's wired into some sort of a container or a tent or a bunker or whatever, wherever we are. You move this thing goes back and forth, and you have a screen that you're looking at and earphones. And if there's something moving out there, it will show you lines going up and down, and you'll hear some kind of noise on your earphones. There's 2 of them. There's a crew getting ready to go out. You can see 2 of them set up. This was what we looked into here. So 1/3 of the time we were at base camp. This is a guard tower where one of the units is set up, and it's scanning. Not 180, but something close to that. We all had dogs.
Yeah.
This was the guard tower where I was near. We were actually over here, and the guard tower for us was over here. They had machine guns, they had grenade launchers, they had white phosphorus flares that they'd shoot up if we had anything outside. And we only worked during the night. So we worked from, it's close to the equator, so you had a pretty long night, pretty close to 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of nighttime. didn't have anything to do during the day. Well, we monkeyed around a little bit. Now this was what you call a poncho liner, and somehow they got out into the village and they'd make jackets out of them, they'd make all kinds of things, vests, whatever, and then they would sell them back to you. And there's another guy that's selling souvenirs. I don't know. I brought that home and a couple of pipes, but I did not bring anything that big home. Okay, the only time that I actually could use a truck where we didn't get choppered in to where we were going, I took pictures of the roadside. This is the typical village farmer house with that size, with that shape. Some were metal roofs, some were thatched. Rice paddies along the road. Through a village. Those are the women doing the work, by the way. The heavy loads. There's this little store on the way. A little shopping center, like a mall. More rice fields. I saw no cars in 13 months, not one. This was typical. Sometimes you'd see 4 people on there, not just 3. And then, of course, the buses. There's a bus stop. Besides the Americans, there were also Koreans and Australians. We never did see any Australians there, but the Koreans were in the Central Highland area. Okay, so one of the bases that I was at was actually down on the seashore, out of the Central Highlands area, down to the sea, in a place called Vinh Quang. And there was a small unit of Vietnamese soldiers there. This is a family in a bunker. We only had to do a year, but these people had to live there and do this year after year, so pretty tough. That's our unit up on top, up there. This was a unique place because, you'll see it in a second, we were in an old house that had been bombarded. There were dikes that were holding the sea back, and the Viet Cong blew the dikes, so twice a day we couldn't get off of where we were. It was flooded from the tide coming in. There wasn't any law about kids smoking. This is the house where we stayed for a couple of weeks. I don't even remember how long it was, maybe a month. But it had taken quite a bit of shelling. Those are my uniform there. It was a strange situation. 2-man crews assigned to different places, artillery bases, landing zones, outposts. We didn't report to anybody. We just went in there and did our job, and we get a message to go someplace else, and we would go. So it was fairly casual, I'd like to say. Now, we didn't have any officers around because we were isolated, so we did pretty much what we wanted to do. This is the inside. These are ammo boxes that blocked up an empty window. That's one of the guys on the team. 18, 19. Merry Christmas, 1969. This was kind of a strange deal. Not only were you homesick, but we had 2 Navy SEALs come out of nowhere and just wanted a place to stay. And we shared food with them, and they told us a lot of stories. And it made it a lot more interesting than just sitting there, the 2 of us, moaning and groaning because we were there.
Landing zones and outposts. The difference between an outpost and a landing zone, outpost usually had not much of anything. I mean, we're sleeping in that tent right there. It's raining every day for like 2 weeks in a row. I don't have my boots on because they were wet. I'm tired of having wet feet. A landing zone, you might have a folding cot or even a bunk bed, but an outpost was pretty temporary and not much there. When these guys would come in, you were just tickled to death because that meant mail and more food. Another one I'll show you. When it was dry, that dust was everywhere. I mean, it just, you had to cover your face. This is one of the places we stayed. Our rubber mats or rubber, what do you call them? It'd be like a raft that you float on in a pool. Blow them up, stick them under the ground. I guess they slept in there. This was one where when we had a fairly frightening experience. We were at the edge of a mountain on Ashaw Valley, which had actually North Vietnamese coming in trucks. I mean, a lot of them. But up to this time, it had been Viet Cong. You have small groups of people. B-52 bombers were bombing the other side of that mountain with 500 and 1,000-pound bombs. And every time they dropped one, it was like an earthquake. You're talking about guys 6 miles in the air, 30-some thousand feet, and we're hoping and praying that somehow they are not going to miss and get them on our side of the mountain, because, I mean, it's being every time one hits, you're getting shook. Other than just having to clean the dust off of everything because of all the earth shaking, we escaped without any problems. This is a chopper ride to our next base. As you can see by these spots in here, this had been bombed pretty heavily. Again, this is about 3,000 feet up, flying to the next place. This is coming into Pointe up in the highlands. So we're back up off the coast up into the highlands. Here's the dust being raised from the Chinook coming in. You can see it's quite something. These are Montagnards. It's a different ethnic group than the Vietnamese. There's about a million of them versus the 40 or 50 million Vietnamese. So it's a small minority, and they're strictly in the highlands. So these kids are everywhere. They always want candy or cigarettes or whatever will go. These are mostly 18, 19-year-old kids. You can tell I've been there more than a couple of months now, finally. Getting a little color. They had to carry their water from a spring that was on the outside of the village, so the kids had to fill these gourds up, put them in a basket, and carry them back home. This is the area where the showers in the spring were. You can see there's a pump there. The men were on one side and the women were on the other side, so they'd shower on each side of the hill. Now this was what they wore up until the French and the Americans came in. This is an elder, and you can see it's more like a loincloth, and the kids are all dressed in Western wear. Well, there's a hybrid. He's got the loincloth on and the shirt. There's soldiers. Bananas, corn, beans, see a lot of that. We didn't have any rice right around where we were. This was interesting because multiple families lived in one of these long houses, so I assume it would be brothers and sisters, relatives, all on stilts. This was a graveyard. They built houses for their graves. And they had carvings. This one's interesting because it's a French soldier. And why? I don't know if he was buried there or they were honoring him or what. But this was more typical of what you'd see. But that one guy stood out. They're everywhere. The only problem I had with it, I kind of a little bit claustrophobic, so I really didn't like being in those things that long. But you have to sleep there, you have to sleep there. And I hated rats, and there were rats there, and I hated that. They could never get rid of them. And it rained. Luckily, there was a dry season and a wet season, so usually during the ride, you got time to dry out. I really like taking pictures of the kids. That was after a year. You didn't have to shine your shoes there. I've always been a collector, and I just couldn't help myself. I ended up getting these pipes and brought back this whole bag of stuff, and she said, "What are you going to do with those?" So I got them framed, and it's interesting because there's 2 or 3 there you can tell before they really saw the French and Americans. But once the Americans and the French were there, they started taking casings, brass casings, shells, and using those. This one had a ballpoint pen put into it. And they take bits and pieces of this and that and make things. Just find it kind of interesting. Nine months after I was there, we got together. In Hawaii, it was very difficult to leave. We had a wonderful week. I'd only talked to her 3 times, and that was a very difficult conversation because you were doing it on a radio, so you'd say, "I love you," over. And she'd say, "I love you too," over. So you wait days to get in line to get your 2 minutes. So 2 days before, your stomach is building up to this. It's tough. So I got a chance to go to another one, and I went to Japan, and it was great to see the world and see what else, Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, and enjoyed getting away again. Now I'm really getting short. I've only got a couple more months to go. And the craziest thing happened. They said if you stay 1 more month, you can get out 5 months early. Now this wasn't me personally. This was widespread at that point. They were trying to reduce from 540,000 people down. We could see the way it was going. It was winding down. We weren't winning. We weren't losing, we weren't going anywhere. So they said, okay, if you stay that extra month, we'll give you a leave. Well, you think, are you crazy? Why would you want to take a chance of getting killed the last month you're there? But It took 2 days to get to Cameron Bay, 7 days to take the leave, 2 days to get back, so that's 11 out of 30. So that's 19 days, and they wouldn't send me out in 19 days. I'd stay at the base. Well, I don't want to go back and make $150 by myself while she's in Toledo, Ohio with my son. I said, I want out. When I'm done, I'm done. So I took the extra month, and when I left Vietnam, I was done. So I was very happy to be alive and sort of sane and go back to real life. So here we are at Cameron Bay. This is my last day there. This is the last day a mortar hits a oil tank. So we all bail out of the barracks and get in the bunkers, and I think, you gotta be kidding me. This is the last day. What the heck's going on? Is it gonna be any worse than that? And luckily it wasn't. They shot up the flares. We're looking for where it came from so they could either hit it with artillery or choppers. I forgot to mention, and I didn't even realize this until I got home, that 10% of all the deaths involved helicopters. And that's what, we went everywhere we were going with helicopters, and I had no idea. I said, no wonder those guys take off so fast and try to land fast and get out of there, because that's the prime time where you get shot down, is either landing or taking off. And that's why they flew 3,000 feet. So anyway, that was that, and got on the plane. We're going home, June 10th, 1970. I can't read it. Okay, any questions? Yes, Mary?
What did you get to eat while you were there? I mean, did somebody cook for you, or?
I lost 20 pounds. If you were at the base, you could have regular powdered milk and powdered eggs and meat, and lettuce and things like that. But when we were out, it was K rations or MRE meals ready to eat, and come in a cardboard box with little green cans in it. No beer, no whiskey, none of that. But there's X thousand calories that are supposed to take care of you, but if you don't like what you got, you don't eat it, or you don't eat much of it. So, yeah, it wasn't what you call a gourmet situation. Actually, the MREs were better than the K rations. That kind of came on at the tail end, but there was the bags that you heat up with hot water, and you had macaroni and cheese and spaghetti and things like that. But yeah, it was good. We got back to base camp periodically, so we had real food and things like that. Yes.
Were those multiple family huts, buildings on stilts?
Yes.
Were they primarily on stilts to keep them away from rats and critters and stuff?
Yeah. Yep. Ron.
So when you were watching the radar and you picked up that there was movement out on the road or something, what would you do?
We would call it in, and they would determine between artillery or gunships what they would do. If we were close to an artillery base, they'd fire in artillery and make a lot of noise. Gunships were amazing because if they came in, it would be like these giant red legs walking. Those are the tracers that were coming down from the guns that they were shooting. And boy, you'd heaven help anybody that's down there when those things are going off. At the end of that, the next morning, somebody would come over and say, well, how many did we get? I go, I got this little screen, and I have these ears, and you're asking me. He said, I have to have a number. I have to have a number. I said, okay, 8. I don't know. Bill?
Yeah, from your perspective of being over there and the experiences you had, do you think this was a wise move on the part of our country to get involved?
I knew somebody would ask a political question. Arthur is a Vietnam veteran, and Ron too, and right here, Arthur, right there. We're selling fighter jets to Vietnam right now. I think you know the answer.
Yeah.
150,000 people were wounded, 58,000 killed, and we're selling jets to them. We have a big trade going on with them. We have a trade deficit of $100 billion with Vietnam buying their clothes and everything else that they make. So what do we get out of it?
Were you exposed to the Agent Orange?
Anybody else?
Yeah, we got a question back here.
Were you ever around the Agent Orange over there?
Yes. And luckily, I haven't had any problems. My brother is also there, and he's had a series of things. Gene's cousin has had internal problems for his whole life. In fact, I'm surprised he's still alive. Yes, Jim?
Yes, a lot of fun. Two questions. How fast and well did you learn the local language? And then when you went on your leaves, did you, you said you met your wife.
Yeah.
Didi Mao, Ba Mi Ba, Dinky Dow.
Number 10.
Number 10, number 1. If you're good, you're number 1. You give them candy, you're number 1. You don't give them candy, you're number 10. They learned enough pidgin English, and we had our phrases that we used, but that's about it. Nothing really. I think the only time we were really, there was one place where there was 2 of us and 3 of the Vietnamese ARVNs, Army Republic of Vietnam, ARVN, and we tried to communicate with them. They invited us to a dinner one time, and they killed a duck that they brought up and had some rice and some kind of greenery, and so we had shared a meal, and we, you just get by with what you can. I found out that the salad dressing was duck blood after I'd already eaten it. But we tried to do what you could do. Not getting mail for 2 weeks because I was at a place where you couldn't get mail, and then all of a sudden she'd get all these letters. Or if I was in a place where it was raining for 2 weeks, I didn't write any letters because it would have gotten all wet. And then she'd hear on the news LZ Uplift or LZ Crystal or LZ Ollie got overrun, and I was there. Not then, but before they got overrun. So she really had, besides living with her parents and having a baby, and well, most of you have been separated at some point in your life, and it's just not easy with a baby. Yes?
How often did you change partners that you were working with?
Pretty frequently, actually. This was a strange deal. This was people coming and going. I wasn't in a unit that was standard that came over as a group and then left. So it was probably every couple months. And if anybody didn't get along, we'd switch around. But there were only 12 of us and 6 teams, so there wasn't a lot of leeway. Okay. Oops. Maureen.
I just want to say one thing. Thank you for sharing this beautiful love story so close to Valentine's Day.
Thank you so much, Jim. Extremely interesting. And I really appreciate you doing this. So all you veterans out there that haven't spoke a little bit about your career in the military, however short or long it was, I'd appreciate it if you would volunteer and follow up with Jim. I'm sure you agree that this was a very interesting talk, and I think all of you really have an interesting story to tell, even though you may not have been in Vietnam. A few of you have. Thanks for coming. And Arthur, thank you. And Ron. So anyway, next meeting is in March, the first Monday at 9:30 here, and the speaker to be determined. So I'm looking for one of you veterans to tell your story. Just let me know. And really, thanks so much to Jim. He spent a lot of time, dug through a lot of photos, and I know that he had some help from Jim. But I really appreciate all the effort. Yes.
I think I have a question. Jim, those shoes that we saw, are those the same boots that you found in your box that you had saved when you moved here?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
And you finally threw them away, or do you still have them?
13 moves, 55 years, I finally got rid of them coming here.
So what'd you get rid of, Jim?
His boots.
My boots.
Your boots. So he got rid of his boots. They didn't have to shine anyway. Okay, thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate it. Jim appreciates it. And let me know to when you want to come and tell your story. And the meeting will be in March on the 3rd, 9:30, this room. And I'm working on a speaker to be determined later. So thank you for coming. And remember, all Mason Pointe residents are invited. This meeting is not just for veterans, but it is for veterans to tell their story. So thank you. See you in March.
Arthur, what did you have to tell?